Bruce "the Bearman" Smith was a Canadian football all-star and team captain of the Toronto Argonauts. He passed away in January of this year, but not before chronicling his amazing personal story with the help of co-author Phil Kershaw, who felt compelled to trumpet this story far and wide, and we'll find out why in just a moment. Phil knows CFL football very well, having served as the league's chairman, as well as president of both the Saskatchewan and Ottawa football teams. Besides professional sports, Phil has been actively involved in business, government, and politics. But he's here to give us some insights into the life of a man who not only had a powerful body, but also a powerful heart of compassion and influenced so many lives for the good. The book is called Our Father, the Prodigal Son Returns. Phil, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Ron. It's great to be with you and visit with you, because the first time you and I met, Bruce and I came out and visited you right in this facility. So right. I kind of think it's a nice circle effect to now come back and talk about the book. And sadly, our friend isn't with us, but we're here to honor him and hopefully tell his story to a wide array of people.
Well, then that begs the question, why were you so compelled to tell Bruce's story?
Well, it goes back to 2005, and you may remember this. People in Toronto and the Southern Ontario area will remember it was chronicled as the Summer of the Gun. In the summer of 2005, there were 52 young black men shot and murdered right here in the Greater Toronto area, mostly in those public housing projects. And although that may be a modest number in certain U.S. cities, it was very shocking, I think, to us, and there was a lot of coverage. And I phoned Bruce because I was working with him and said, you're an African American, you lived in segregation, you have some knowledge. Why don't you get involved with this? Because he was working with King Bay Chaplaincy and corporate people, and maybe bring to the table, obviously, some notoriety, both as a pastor and certainly as a football player, to speak into this. And he came back and came up with the fundamental reason that he believed that there was this issue was the lack of fathers. And he said, I know this because my father left our family when I was 2 years old. Then we struggled. I had a stepfather, but then the stepfather was somewhat abusive. So he says, I understand this story. He said, and in fact, I'm not overly excited to tell it, because by telling it, I've kind of got to relive a lot of painful memories. But we both agreed that this was something that had to get out. And so now, through the kind auspices of Castle Key Books and with help with people like 100 Huntley Street, hopefully we can tell this story far and wide.
And it is on our e-store, and you'll see from time to time the information will pop up for you. But let's go back a ways in Bruce's story, because as I was reading it, and his time as a young boy growing up in southern U.S., civil rights, movement, the segregation, all the challenges he faced. Maybe just share a summary of what he went through growing up.
Well, he was raised and born in a little town called Gainesville, Texas, and then when he was about 10 years old, after his father had abandoned the family, as I said, they moved to a town called Huntsville. Now, Huntsville, as you know a little bit about that part of the world, is where they have the Huntsville State Penitentiary, and he lived in a tenement called the Alley, which was in the shadow of the Huntsville Penitentiary, which sort of ironically, and it plays into this book, which sort of reads a little bit like fiction novel, is where the executions are all carried out in the state of Texas. And those days, when he was a kid, it was with the electric chair called Old Sparky, which of course had sparks flying off it. But he really chronicles, I think, and for us, many of us as Canadians, slightly shocking that in those days there was Jim Crow laws, there was segregation, blacks were not allowed to use the same washroom as whites, they couldn't drink out of the same drinking fountain. When he wanted as a kid to get a Dairy Queen ice cream, there was a special counter at the back of the Dairy Queen. There was an incident when he was growing up in Huntsville where some black kids swam in the public pool, and do you know what they did? They emptied the pool. Now, for us, I think, in 2013, living in Canada, all this seems incomprehensible, but we have to tell that story so we can give some context to the things that he went through, because being of the age he was, there was segregation when he grew up, and even when he went away to become a football player at Colorado, It was at a pretty much all-white university, and racial tensions were high. There was race riots going on. There was the Vietnam War. So it really becomes an interesting kind of chronicle. You know, the movie The Butler talks about the fellow who worked in the White House all of these years. Well, Bruce's story sort of parallels that, of a kid who is fatherless, looking for this, and also dealing with segregation, and then eventually sort of making his way out to the world. So in that way, he sort of was raised in the church, as almost all African Americans are, but when he went away to the world, he was a little bit like the prodigal son. He was looking. He didn't drink, by the way, so he was like John the Baptist, but he certainly ate from the tree of life.
Well, a lot of you know, wild living that he got into,
yep,
and you know, far from God, and that's why the story "The Prodigal Son Returns" is a good subtitle for it. So share a bit about what it was that turned him around.
Well, as he chronicles in the book, he was a successful football player, obviously, and that's well known. He went on to become the most successful real estate agent, which stunned everybody, after retiring from football around age 30. And he had his own real estate company. As you can see one of the ads, I think, up now on the screen. And, but the problem was he had a watch for every day of the week, a fur coat, Rolexes, Kershaw's, Mercedes-Benzes, but he knew that something was missing in his life. And the anguish and the pain, the original pain he had from not having a stable father in his life, was compelling him. So he tried all kinds of New Age things and you know, new Eastern religions. And eventually he came to the point where he was one day, as a real estate agent, was doing an open house, and there was a Bible in the house, and it flipped open to the New Testament, and he started reading about John the Baptist. Well, Bruce had never drank, even though he was a wild man, never drank, never took drugs, and always wore a fur coat. Well, there's John the Baptist, as you know, was of course an abstainer, and always had a big fur vest on. So he started relating to John the Baptist, and then he started to attend church. And all of a sudden there was this huge movement, I think, of the Holy Spirit to sort of show him, hey, you're mine. And then he started to feel remorse, repentance. He realized that he, you know, had not ever forgiven anyone. He realized, hey, a lot of the stuff I'm doing is not right. And he went through this whole transformation that eventually got to the point where he decided to give up this massively successful career in real estate and to turn his life to God, and actually became an ordained minister, and ministered, worked at King Bay Chaplaincy through Tom Caldwell in the TD Center in Toronto, and then started mentoring young kids through Sparrowway Housing Project, and that's where the book started to evolve, getting into this whole idea, how do we help young fatherless kids, and what can we do for them?
And those were some very quick highlights of Bruce's life, but just the way it's told, and in the first person, as Bruce tells it, is just so compelling. He was on 100 Huntley Street through the years a few times, and I think we have a clip that we want to share of the last time he was on. Here's Bruce.
When you realize that as a football player, we are put into a certain dimension of being big, tough people. I mean, that's the thing that you go with. But the bottom line is, when you get in touch with who you are in Christ Jesus, all the elements of Christ are in you. And the number one element of who he is and what the whole world should be all about is called L-O-V-E. It's called love. And when you realize that that dimension of love is out of which all things come, you start to open up, and you start to be free to share, free to be honest, free not to live in denial, not to live in the law of flesh, which is sin and death, but live in the law of truth, which comes through knowing Jesus Christ.